Our first speaker is Nadarajan, who is the Dean of the Penny Stamp School of Art and Design here at the university. He's an art theorist and curator working at the intersections of art, science, and technology. He brings with him to his talk today experience having curated over 20 international media art exhibitions around the world. He's also written, co-edited, co-authored 5 books, over 100 book chapters and articles, and his writings have been translated into 12 languages. So looking forward to both information about media arts and I guess maybe international context. Thank you.
And thank you, Carla, for inviting me, and thank you all for being here. I think we still are experiencing cold weather, and I hear that Carla tells me that we have had 90 inches of snow, and our colleague from Michigan State tells me that they have more. So we are going to order more snow, guys, and beat them. Okay, so this is firstly, I'm excited that we are having a conference of this nature, because I think the question of how technology figures in and within the museum world, and how we display, how we think about, how we exhibit, how we contextualize artworks, especially this is my concern. And I have, in my talk, I'm really going to try and address something that is slightly different from what has been talked about in the earlier session. A lot of times when we talk about technology in museums or in museum studies, the tendency is to talk about the archiving, the digitizing, the making it available to a broader public, disseminating in different ways, websites that would help people reach broader audiences. But I think there is another technological challenge that I think that we need to think about much more systematically. And it's been around, that technological challenge has been gnawing at the side of museums for a long time, but it's not the museums have not exactly been receptive or able to cope with the kinds of demands, those kinds of technologies and technological configurations how they impact these museums. So the question of artworks that are using technology, what we broadly talk about as, at least in the field I'm in, we talk about it as media arts. Media arts, for those of you who, how many of you have heard of the word media arts? Oh, good, excellent. So many of you are familiar with what I'm talking about. But media art forms have a long history, and one of my interest areas is the history of media arts, to try and talk about the fact that this is not just a contemporary phenomena, this is not just a phenomena that happens because of computing technologies. It's the most computer-generated media arts, the most recent instantiation of media arts, but they are not by any means the only form. And we need to acknowledge that in the art world, we have dealt with these media art forms for a long time, and it needs to find its place within the museums also. So media arts, as I see it and as I've been defining it, art forms and practices that are mediated and generated by the developments in information, communication, imaging, experiential, where you are trying to create experiences using technologies, interaction, and biotechnologies. These include video, virtual reality, artworks that are employing virtual reality technologies to generate experiences, net art, artworks that are specifically disseminated and created for the net platform, interactive art, where interaction is a primary mode by which you are engaging the work and receiving the work, Games are an important part of the media arts world, not just games as such, but game art, where artists are actually working with games, game patches, game modalities to create experiences. Animation is an important area. Machinima, which is the use of animation technologies, real-time animation technologies to create cinematic experiences, film narratives. Robotic arts, artists using robotics in their practice and creating experiences which are essentially automated and robotic in nature. Bioarts, which is really artists using biological substances, biological entities in creating artworks. Nano arts is a really growing field, and lots and lots more artists who are getting access to nanotechnologies and creating experiences that are artistic in nature using nanotechnologies. As I have listed these and as I've talked about these, you probably have seen the stark contrast between what these are and what museums as spaces have traditionally shown. And even in Piotr's presentation, you could see a lot of the works that were being archived were works that are two-dimensional, sculptural, sometimes installations, but still fundamentally not as technology intensive as these works are. So when I said that media arts gnaws at the site of museums, it does, and it does that very often. And what I would like to talk about today really is just from a personal experience and a professional point of view, how I have had to deal with the museum context in creating media art exhibitions or curating media art exhibitions. And this is by no means meant to be kind of a comprehensive kind of take on how everyone experiences this. I'm just talking about very specific things I have witnessed in the last 15 years that I've been doing this. So I'll start with just outlining a few things that I think continues to be part of the struggle of curators working in media arts, working within an art museum context. There is simply no technological infrastructure in many museums to showcase any of these works. And I'll recount some experience later, but just whether it's wireless capabilities, adequate server space, having high throughput bandwidth that will allow us to show high bandwidth works, having an understanding that some of these works are going to be moving around and actually, if it's a robotic work, then it's going to be moving around, and there are some structural and safety and security issues that are implied that clearly have not been thought through in terms of security systems, in terms of technology within the museums. There is lack of adequate training and experienced curatorial and exhibition staff. And this is something that I hope would change in the museum studies world. You know, we do need to train the next generation of museum professionals understanding how to deal with artworks that are fundamentally technological in nature, that are generated by, that are mediated by, that are received through some kinds of technological means. And this is happening right now. It's been happening for many years now, but we still have not created enough structures, pedagogical frameworks, educational materials, curricula to deal with this. The work is going on, but it's still not spreading enough, especially in the museum world. And I also think that there's something at odds about the conservation, preservation mission that museums set out to do, and the way in which technology generated works tend to have this limited shelf life, or at least it looks like it has a limited shelf life. And I'll talk a bit about it in a short while. and there is also a different notion of what is legitimate and interesting and useful form of interaction between the visitor and the museum exhibits. In the media arts world, interaction is very, very key. We want them to, as curators, we constantly think about how to get them engaged in it. We enjoy the fact that people are touching it and holding it and moving it around, and so do the artists. The artists see the wear and tear that happens to the work as part of the risk of making and showcasing works like these. But it's not the case necessarily in the museum context. You still have, I can tell you many, many stories about how I have had to deal with museum security guards to try to explain to them that, no, it's fine that they are actually touching these things. No, it's fine that they are actually doing this. This is what we want. Please don't stop them. And I suspect, and I have witnessed in many occasions, a kind of a technophobia. Not a malicious one, just a phobia that comes from not knowing enough, not having an awareness that alleviates some of your fears about it. In museum professionals, in the museum world, and I really hope that will change. I'll give you two examples of projects I did, and both of them happen to be in Singapore, but I'm trying to show the change that happened between 2001, when I tried one kind of exhibition, and 2008. I'll show you both examples. Singapore, for many of you who might not know much about it, it's a highly technologically extremely advanced country. But throughout the time I've been trying to work as a curator, as a theorist in Singapore, I've found it very difficult to find spaces to actually show artists who are working in new technologies. The Singapore Art Museum in late 99, early 2000, approached me to do an exhibition there on new media or media arts. And I agreed, and we worked towards trying to put an exhibition together. It was fascinating because very quickly we realized that the museum is housed, the Singapore Art Museum right now even is housed in a late 19th century convent, a Catholic convent, and it was converted, and there were some very strict guidelines on conservation of the building and what could be put in and what could not be put in. The electric circuits were very heavily prescribed. So I went in and I said, look, I'm going to show you, I'm going to show some net artists working in games and this and that. And I said, oh, that's great, well, fantastic, so come along. And I realized that they did not have Ethernet cables within the exhibition spaces. They did not have wireless capabilities for some of the works that were involving wireless access. And this was early days of indoor wireless access for us. And 10 years is 10 years or 15 years is very long in technological terms. So I quickly realized that I could not do the exhibition because they just did not have the infrastructure to embark on it. So they said, well, what do we do? I said, well, okay, so let's try and raise some money to put some things here. So we did. We actually wired up 8 galleries within the museum with internet capabilities, with wireless capabilities, and we enhanced their server space in the museum so that we can show some, really, we wanted to run some of the game engines for the game works. And it was, we did that at huge cost. So I was trying to convince the museum. I said, look, don't do it as a one-time thing. Do it permanently, because this is not the first time you will do it, hopefully, and you will probably do it further, and you want to make it permanent. They said, oh, no, but we might not use it anymore, and it's too much of a cost. I said, but you're already incurring that cost. Why don't you just make it permanent? They didn't want to do it. And so I raised over $130,000 to put that exhibition together, of which I spent maybe $30,000 just on wiring up the space and preparing the space. And it was all taken down 2 months after. It was extremely depressing simply because I could have used that could have been useful for generations of artists to continue to show in that space. I mean, it's capable. It's ready and capable to show those works if you choose to show them. You won't use it when you're showing paintings. You won't use it when you're showing sculptures. But at least you'll be able to use it when you need it. And so another experience that was really funny was that we started. We showed in one of the central lobby areas. We showed a game work, and we set up this was two artists who had actually developed a game patch and were working on a game that people could play in the museum itself. So the museum was very happy that there were tons of people. I mean, every day there were queues outside the museum for young people who wanted to come and play the game. And they were making a lot of noise, of course. They were enjoying themselves, and they were queuing up around, and it was all good, we thought. But the museum said, look, there are other spaces that are actually, they are not very happy because there's a painting exhibition in Gallery 3 and 4 that, people are complaining about the fact that there's so much of noise in this exhibit. And we said, look, but that's what the work is. This is what this work is about. And the work is for people to engage and enjoy, and how else can it be? And then there were, and the works continuously, and this is something that you will always face with media artworks in a museum context. Not only in a museum context, any context, media artworks always have a tendency to fail. They might stop working. They will work for a while, and then there'll be some other problem. Someone will interact with it in a wrong way, and then it will end up stalling. But that's part and parcel of what this is. Sometimes when you go into a museum and you're looking at a painting that is supposed to be lit up by daylight, and it's a cloudy day, right? You don't say, well, oh, I can't see this work right now. You're just going to you're going to enjoy it to the extent that you can, and you're going to deal with the fact that that's what the work enables in that particular space at that point in time. So there are some inherent ways in which museums function that has made it extremely difficult for curators, for media artists to function within those contexts. So I'm glad I'm speaking to some of you guys, so that you will change. So this is I'll just show you two examples of works. This is a work called Body Browser. Basically, any part of the body, you could choose any part of the body, and if you click on it, it will be accessing parts of the internet that actually is connected to. So you might, if you click on the hand, what is it? This is the one. So if you click on the hand, or on the penis, or on the feet, you would go to different sites that are associated with it by way of the semantic meanings of the word feet, or so it could go to a site that just basically is a measurement site. It's just talking about feet in terms as a measurement, or it could be a foot therapy site, but it just goes randomly to different sites. But it's basically trying to think about the body as a platform for thinking about browsing. By the way, because Singapore has had a long history of censorship, they were really troubled by the fact that we wanted to have this full body, and the penis was one of the sites that was going to be triggering a lot of, and there were lots of sites that were, I mean, this was automated by the artists. So it will go into a lot of sites that were not necessarily what we wanted kids to see. So we had advisories outside, but they still insisted on blurring the penis after the 5th or 6th day. This is a work that was a total nightmare because this is exactly how it was shown on the floor, 4 panels, and it was all giving you different kinds of data that was global positioning data. And what was interesting is that this work was going on live somewhere else, meaning artists were basically, the artist project was a very simple one. I'll spend just 1 minute on this. The artist's work was basically to look at the connections between physical space, geographical space, and internet space. What they did was they realized that the Singapore Art Museum's website, the server was actually in Malaysia, across the border. So basically what they did was they physically went to the server space, and then they walked from there to the Singapore Art Museum, you know, and they were just sending in live data back to the museum. So of course, this was, again, early days of these kinds of data transmission, and the museum itself was built in a way that was not giving us enough opportunities to get these data in even. So we had to wire it in separately. After the first, second day, we realized that we were not getting the data at all. So it was stalling very often. And so it's a simple one example of how tricky sometimes the work itself suffers as a result of being in a museum. And that's why I ultimately decided that, you know, museums were not necessarily the best context, so, and definitely not as much in Singapore, so I did a lot of projects outside Singapore. So I'll just give you an example, just one example of, I was the artistic director of the Ogaki Biennale. It's a media arts biennale in a town called Ogaki, which is about 40 minutes from Kyoto. It's an important city for literature. It was the birthplace of Matsuo Basho, the haiku poet, but it's also, it was also touted as an important IT capital. It was developing as an IT capital. So they invited myself and a local curator to work together on an exhibition. And we realized very quickly that there were no real museums that we could work with. So we had 72 exhibits all across the city, in palaces, in Shinto shrines, in community spaces, on the streets. So some examples. This was actually a work about natural spirits. Kodama is a natural spirit that of the forest that actually speaks back to you when you speak to it. So this artist had done a project like that, and we actually located it in a Shinto shrine. This was actually an artist collective from Delhi. They were looking at issues of filing and bureaucracy, especially around questions of monitoring and surveillance and secrecy. And so this was actually installed in the vault of a bank, of a defunct bank. The bank had been closed. We just took over, and we used the bank vault to actually show this in there. This was a work, a perpetual sound machine that was installed in a Shinto shrine also. This is a beggar robot that basically was on the streets of Ogaki and just begging for money. And people we actually collected quite a bit of money from that. So move up 7 years, Singapore, by the time I'd already left Singapore, and colleagues in Singapore were planning to organize this huge symposium, which was both an exhibition as well as a conference in 2008, and we started working on it for almost 2 years. This project was one of the biggest projects I've done. I personally, in my capacity as artistic director, had to raise a lot of money for this, and we raised over $2 million in terms of money and in-kind support. And the project was in the National Museum, but not the National Museum, the old building, but the National Museum extension, which was fully equipped with Ethernet cables, wireless capabilities. So it was fun to work with. So it was, this was it was about, I don't know, almost 300,000 square foot space. We had a lot of space, and we used that space to create a pretty compelling experience for the works. And we had in the main space, we had about 17 works, and then we had a further 72 works across the city. So this is the work by Claire Waite, an artist. So by the way, this was, all the works were created by residencies. The artists were in residence in research labs in Singapore for 3 months before they made the works. So the works did not exist before they came there. This is called a water book, which is a water-based interface for accessing information about water. So basically what you actually use you dip your hands in the water, and you are interacting with words that are there that are allowing you to access information from the net. There were lots of complaints about this because there was lots of water being splashed around, but we loved it. This is a work where the brain waves of two different individuals are being simultaneously generated to generate images on screen. So it's almost like a brain war of images. That's what's happening. They are constantly moving. Their brain waves are constantly affecting the images themselves. This was a game that was developed, that was patched and intervened by a Serbian art group. This was a Dutch artist and a Dutch collective that actually developed some early works on cultural analytics. This is a work by a Korean artist. She actually did a project. This was the most low technology project of all, where she had basically printed on paper all the changes she had made to a single Wikipedia site. So every one of those lines that you see is one change that she made. This is an interactive work, was making a lot of noise. It's a gamelan set, musical instruments that is being interacted with by the person interacting with the video with a movement recognition system. So I don't know how many of you know of the Variable Media Initiative. Good. So this is one of the most exciting things that I think happened for many people in the media arts world in relation to the museum world. In 1999, the Guggenheim Museum initiated the Variable Media Initiative, which was basically structured around the idea of how do we preserve, conserve, curate art forms that would become technologically obsolete, that would be constantly changing over its lifetime, not just changing by way of wear and tear, but constantly changing as a result of changing conditions and changes in the system that they are dependent on. They subsequently had a book, and I will very strongly recommend that all of you who are interested in how does one think about media arts, both in terms of acquisition, in terms of curation and conserving them. This is a really good resource, the Variable Media Approach book. And one of the interesting things that they came up with is the concept of emulation rather than preservation. So when it comes to media artworks, their argument was, look, imagine an artist created a work in 1985 or 86. with an XT286 computer, right? Which has a particular kind of memory, a certain ability to process information, and it generates images with low resolution. Now, when you acquire the work, when the museum acquires that work and shows that work in 2015, do you show it with the XT286, or do you show it with something else that will run it faster and in a more stable manner with higher pixelation? What would you do? And well, in the case of media artists, because many of them are still alive, what the available media project suggests is that get scores, what they call scores, from the artists themselves. The artists give specific prescriptions on how to show, how, if there are technological obsolescence that actually leads to need for changing it differently, how do you do that? Do you do that at all? Do you have the artist's permission to do that? Or do the artists still want you to show it in the XT286 if it still exists? And if you need to show it in XT286, how do you keep the XT286, working for that long? And if it cannot, then how do you make the changes? So these are the kinds of questions that they were trying to ask artists and develop some strategies for developing. So emulation is really how can you create, emulate the structure, the intent of the artist by other means at the back end to provide a front end experience that is still retaining the quality and the content of the work. So this is one of those Trojan horses, I hope, that would slowly change. It has changed, actually. Since the Available Media Project, the number of artists, media artists who have been acquired by museums has increased. The number of artists, museums that are acquiring works that actually are far more impermanent and can be subject to technological obsolescence has increased. So it's a good sign, meaning that today we know how to acquire these works, we know how to curate them, we know how to show them. And I think it's a good development, and I hope it gets to more of you, and it will lead to a future where more of the museums are able to show and interact, and people can interact with media artworks. Thank you.